G'day ladies and gents, welcome to War Thunder with Mags. Well, it's the 14th of the 4th and the dev server is back up. Now, I'm just going to get straight into it. We've got a few flight models to go through here. First up's the Mosquito FB Mk 18. Now this thing's effectively a Mosquito, but with the 20mm cannons replaced with 7.7mm machine guns and a 57mm cannon mounted underneath, which looks really cool when it fires. Flight model overall is basically identical to the standard Mosquito, but the extra weight involved with carrying that cannon on board means it is a little sluggish. I don't think this thing's going to be very effective in air combat, short of blowing up bombers, but against tanks and eventually naval shipping, I think this will be a real goer. Also, that 37mm cannon only carries 25 shots, so in realistic battles she is going to be light on ammunition. Only pull the trigger if you're going to hit the target. So, next up, let's go have a look at the new Spitfire flight model. So here we are, back in the Spitfire Mark 22, Griffin powered, and it does have its own flight model now. Just fire up the engine, push the throttles up, and she gives a roll. It takes a little bit to get her rolling, but nothing like when she had the Typhoon flight model. Acceleration down the runway is pretty bloody good once she gets going, gets the tail up off the ground straight away. Now her top speed in air is 604 kilometers an hour, and I can vouch she can make it, and she gets there bloody fast. The 21.7 turn time is definitely a barrage. This thing turns a lot faster than that, even in stock format, and 4,441 feet per minute climb rate. Now, that one I'm not so sure about. Flying this thing around for a little bit, the climb rate was the one area where it felt a little low. Maneuverability wise, this thing was incredible, and speed, holy crap, it just blows you away how quickly this thing accelerates and gets up to full combat speeds. I'm barely off the runway and I'm already punching up to 400 kilometers an hour. Maintaining 400 through roll, gentle dive again. Do a low altitude maneuverability test. I was actually looking around on the map to see if there were any bridges I could fly under, but there didn't seem to be any around. That's sort of my thing on test maps, try and fly under bridge and then under bridge again. So I decided I'd chase the river and see if I can keep this thing above it at full throttle. So keep it firewalled up over 400 on the approach to 450. So roll, just hit the beach there a little bit, or the riverbank. The goal when you're doing this sort of a run is to try and keep the aircraft flying over the top of the river at all times and see whether or not it has the maneuverability to be able to stay there. Try and roll it out a little there and was able to make the turn. Yeah, this thing turns like a dream. It's going to be nightmarish to fight in any form of high-speed turn battle. And at the amount of speed it retains, doing all these maneuvers, it's really not dropping past 400 or very little drop past 400. That little straight there was more than enough to accelerate it back. Still no bridges. Alright, let's do a stall test. Straight up to burst climb, 1,000 feet. Up past 2,000 now. Critical speed warning comes in at about 180 kilometers an hour. But it's a simple matter of rolling it over, putting the nose straight back at the ground, and it's already back up to speed, out of the stall, and just rolling straight back out. This thing was just a dream to fly. The climb rate, I don't think it is climbing as it says it is on the stat card, but it's still not bad. Alright, next up, we're going to take a look at the Meteors. Specifically starting with the Meteor F3, and we're going to go through the entire series for this one. So, here we go. Now, the Meteor series is having a hell of a workover in this patch. Now, it really needed it. The F3s were underperforming, the F4s were overperforming in terms of thrust, and the F8 was underperforming again. So they've had a tinkle across the board. First up, you'll notice how quickly the Meteor F3 is now snap rolling. Overall, it now has WEP, out to 108%. Its roll, it feels about the same at low speeds, but it does roll faster at high speeds. Elevator response is better, turn response is better, yaw is improved, acceleration and top speed improved, burst climb energy retention does feel slightly lower, but sustained climb energy retention on a sustained climb now feels higher. This thing will get into the air at a much higher rate for just gentle climbs, but if you point the nose up, it is going to bleed fast. The air brakes now on it are heavily improved. Overall, the entire plane has been improved in just about every category. This is no longer the joke that it once was. It's going to be very dangerous. You can see there the yaw increases. The original, or the old flight model, could not snap back and forth like that. And it does seem to be across the board that the faster the Meteor gets, the more manoeuvrable it now gets, to the point where you actually have to be very, very, very careful with it when you start getting up around 600 kilometers an hour, because it is possible to break the Meteor now. The C Meteor got basically the same treatment, except it does not have WEP. However, it does appear to have a slightly higher thrust ratio out of the engines than the standard Meteor F3. So overall performance in the end is the same. It's just not having a WEP activation, so the C Meteor tends to overheat at a slower rate. Moving on to the F4s. Now, the Meteor F4 long wing. Now, this aircraft was nowhere near correct. It was nowhere near as manoeuvrable as it should have been for its wing styling, but it had nearly twice the thrust power output than it should have had. That has been corrected. As a result, the long wing has had massive energy retention drops across the board, losses in climb rate, acceleration, and, well, top speed is still achievable, but it's going to take a lot longer to get there. The air brakes have been corrected, however. Those that have flown this plane will know that they were effectively useless on the old flight model. They now work exceptionally well, as they should, for the size that they are, and the overall handling characteristics of the aircraft have been much improved. It will now yaw better, roll better. It does everything much smoother and more accurately than it used to in terms of manoeuvrability and control. Now, I think a lot of people are going to cry nerf on this one, but it's really not. This plane was grossly overperforming, and with its current flight model fully upgraded, this plane is the most competitive jet that the British have in 7.7 battle rating matches. This thing outperforms both the short wing and the Meteor F8. Its flight model is that balked beforehand. This was a repair that was definitely needed on this plane. At the battle rank it was carrying at, it could destroy just about anything it faced. The only thing that did pull this thing up was things like the F-86 Saber and the MiG-15. If it got into a match where the enemy team did not have one or the other, it totally dominated. Now, there was a nasty rumour going about the flight model, or the new flight model for the long wing, that it would break its wings in manoeuvres or in straight flight above 600 and 700 kilometers an hour. This is entirely incorrect. You can see there the roll rate at just under 600 is brilliant. I was doing rolls and loops through then, full elevation barrel rolls at 600 kilometers an hour, no wing breakage. That's 800 kilometers an hour. I'll spike 900 kilometers an hour as I pass over the top of the carrier. Actually over 950, no wing breakage, no overspeed warnings, 6G gentle bump then to put it into the climb, and climb away for altitude, and she still has that energy retention. It's not quite as good as it once was, but as you can see, it wasn't nerfed as badly as people are going to scream about. It's still a damn good plane, but it's now performing vastly closer to the area that it should have been performing than it was before. So let's move on to the next toy for our testing. Now, the Meteor F4 short wing. Now, this plane was suffering from the same overperformance issues that the long wing had. The only reason that the long wing outperformed the short wing because due to that thrust issue was because the long wing is actually a lighter aircraft. The short wing was a bit heavier and it reined in that thrust a little bit. Now, the short wing's been hit by the same nerf bat. Its thrust levels have been cut to the same way, or to the levels it was actually meant to have. As a result, it's got the same performance drops across the board as the long wing. The energy retention on it seems to have retained the same, however, so it does hold the energy that it gains at a much better rate. Its dive performance is higher due to the extra mass, and its overall manoeuvrability seems to have been slightly increased and definitely made much smoother. Overall, this plane just handles better and nicer now. Now the one thing to note is the Meteor long wing that you saw a few moments ago is fully upgraded. This one is only half, so that is the difference in the performance stats you may be seeing in the top left hand corner of the screen now. And if you're wondering where all that performance from the Meteor F4s went to, look no further than Meteor F8. Still no WEP on this one, but she wasn't meant to have it anyway. Sustained climb rate is higher. Straight line acceleration is slightly higher. Burst climb energy retention is higher. Handling feels smoother overall. The entire plane just seems to do everything better than it once did, and this thing is stock. An interesting thing to note that I found that, you know, the Meteor F8s were already incredibly fast in a dive. Their dive speed acceleration was huge. That seems to have been bumped again. These things can, you've got to be very, very, very careful with them throwing into a dive. They can very quickly, in a very short dive, slam into their overspeed warnings. One of the tests I performed today, and unfortunately I didn't get it recorded, starting at 600 kilometers an hour at 10,000 feet, and it only took a 2,500 foot drop to be sitting on 1,000 kilometers an hour with every overspeed warning on the plane lit up all at once. It took seconds. But thankfully the F8, much like all the other Meteor series, has had its air brakes actually fixed. They now work at the rate that they should, so when you get into that situation now, a quick pop of the air brakes pulls the plane up in a real hurry. This thing is very, very, very nice to fly now. Now, the Vampire. Vampire. Well, I think they have actually increased the thrust output. Now, I did a review on this thing a while ago, or just a bit of an overview of why it's so crap. And the reason it's crap is it's an FB5 Vampire. They were never very good to begin with. Most countries only use these things as jet trainers. They very, very few actually deployed them into combat. Now, I did say in that overview that even if Gaijin gave it the couple of £100 of thrust it was missing, it was still going to be a crap aircraft. It was going to be a crap aircraft because it's an FB5. Well, if they have given it that thrust, it's a crap aircraft. So, there you go. The Vampire's biggest problem in this new version of jet matchmaking is it's a 7.7 battle rank, and it really only needs to be 6.7 for its performance. Next up is the F-86F-2, well, the entire F-86 series. Now, this is my F2, which is fully upgraded, short of the bomb pylons, which I'm not in a rush to get. Now, I tested this thing at low speed performance, specifically around its rolling, which I was told was improved. At low speeds, it's exactly the same as the current live server. However, once you start busting 600 kilometers an hour, it rolls like a D13. Just leveling out to get some speed up. And you can see how snappy the controls are now when it's starting to lean from left to right. Quickly burst out that poor truck that has been getting the absolute hell kicked out of it the last couple of dev servers. Get it back up to speed, and look at this. 770 kilometers an hour. And it will maintain this level of roll rate through just about any maneuver you throw the aircraft into now. So, pull it straight around, stand on the elevators. Level it back out, push it into a climb, start dropping speed. And yep, it'll roll just the same that way. The Saber's now going to have its historical manoeuvrability. Now, this was one other change that I noticed as well. The air brakes on this thing were always like throwing an anchor out of the back of the plane. This is no longer the case. Or at least it's partly no longer the case. At high speeds, air brake performance is about the same as it always was. However, once you start dropping below 500 kilometers an hour, the air brakes have less and less effect on the airframe. You'll no longer be able to just stall this thing straight onto the runway during a landing anymore. The air brakes simply will not work at below 300 kilometers an hour. Now, for the final flight model test of this video, the 262 C1A. And I've just activated its rocket engines, and just watch this. Now, my personal notes for the flight model of this aircraft included 2 words. Holy shit, that's it. Keep in mind, this aircraft is 100% stock. It has no upgrade, so its performance is only going to get better as you upgrade it. Hit the button, the rocket engine kicks in, and between 15 and 20 seconds to hit 300 and clear the runway. By the time you're at 30 seconds, you're already climbing past a couple of thousand feet and still accelerating. The climb rate on this is just... when I read 70 meters a second, I didn't believe it. Now I do. Just about to pass 5,000 feet. Now I decided about here that I'm not happy with climbing at 350 kilometers an hour and the acceleration I'm getting, so just quickly drop the nose down for a second and just look at the speed numbers and the rate of acceleration on this thing. Already up over 450. There's 500. 540, 550, 560, yep, tick, 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 and 600 kilometers an hour. Yeah, that's far more like it. We'll stick the nose back up and we'll go back to climbing. Point the nose back into the sky and I'm already punching past 7,000, heading towards 8,000 feet. This thing just, there are no words to describe what it's like flying this plane and seeing the numbers go up that fast. This is the fastest climbing aircraft in the game now. Now, why the aircraft is capable of doing what you're seeing here, and I will punch out at 26,000 feet before I run out of fuel. It does come at the cost. The aircraft is heavier because it is carrying a 163 rocket engine in the tail, and it does only have 3 minutes of fuel for that rocket booster. That's all you get. Once it runs out, the only way to refill it is to land and get a refuel on the runway. Using the booster requires a fresh keybind. You actually have to go into your basic aircraft controls menu and you'll see a slot, activate booster. You'll have to assign a key to it of your choice to turn it on. However, it can be turned on and off in flight. So you will really need to be selective on how you choose to use this booster. Do you use it all at the start, like I'm using here as a test, and climb all the way to altitude? Get it up to around 26,000 feet on a standard aircraft and then just rely on your jet engines from that point on to continue your way through the battle? Or do you burn half of it to get to altitude and save half of that rocket boost for if you really need to either intercept something that's particularly fast or get out of the area in a real hurry? And that'll come down to tactics. And as you can see there, just ran out of fuel. I'm just sitting on 25,000 feet or just under, almost 26. You'll also notice the slight change in the paper doll for the aircraft. It's now actually showing one of the ones from the Italian Spitfire bombers with their 3 engines. When the rocket engine runs out of fuel, there is no fuel gauge for it. All that happens is that center engine on the nose of the paper doll starts flashing black as if some part of your plane has taken critical damage. That's the only notification you get in regards to your rocket fuel being run out. Now besides that, I noticed the handling of the aircraft seems to be better than the standard 262, but something was pointed out to me by Kate and Oz just after in the process of making this video. Previous to this aircraft, getting a 262 to 25,000 feet was almost unheard of. Its climb rate was so low. Is it handling better because it's actually had flight model changes in order to increase its maneuverability, or is it handling better because it's at 26,000 feet and finally in a position where it can use its capabilities? Honestly, I don't know the answer to that one, but regardless, everything I've seen overall, I really like the look of this patch. Now, I was reading somewhere that this may be the final iteration of the dev server, and that means that this patch is getting very, very, very close to going live. How long? Nobody's really said, but fingers crossed it's soon. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed this video. Click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more, fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.